chepek kuduelo mabiro etu under mic. Dong parodit kod jok mawuoye etu under mic. Seche tin sud buta wawinji etu under mic. Wola wachokre wabed piny biwa winje ero chako moment ndi and a podcast makende.
The US House Judiciary Committee hearing on free speech on September 3rd, 2025. Here are my thoughts on the hearing as it was televised. Let me very clearly make some simple points. Any party that prevents peaceful protests against genocide has no right whatsoever to talk about free speech. Any party, political party, that actively promotes another nation that engages in apartheid, that commits war crimes incessantly, that uses deliberately falsified information and propaganda to justify war crimes, and that blatantly commits ethnic cleansing and illegal occupation and genocide has no right to declare itself a guardian of free speech. The Democrats and the Republicans are both complicit in genocide. They have broken numerous international laws. How many coups has the US carried out in sovereign countries just since the turn of the century, usually overthrowing democratically elected governments? The brazenness of these politicians. If there is any nation on this planet that should sit down and sit quietly like a naughty child and be told what is what when it comes to free speech and sovereignty, then that nation is the United States of America. This committee hearing seemed very much in keeping with how the Committee for Un-American Activities operated. I don't know if anybody ever remembers those things. The various politicians on both sides talking up free speech as though either party in the USA has any right to declare themselves a true movement in the fight for free speech was quite a sight. They presented Europe and the UK as regions that were deliberately harming US business. And some even voiced the idea that the US Constitution should be extended or included in these territories as a shining example of guaranteeing free speech. My television doesn't know how close it came to total and utter destruction. There was one expert witness talking about how ex ante, as in before an event has even taken place, that Europe would be trying to punish American businesses. Isn't that how law works? Isn't that how the law against murder works? People are told, do not kill. If you kill, then there is a punishment for you. So if the European Union creates a rule or a law that says all future tech companies have to follow that rule, how is that any different to any other law? Who are these people? And just so you know, here are a few things that in the last 100 years or so, very much since the US Constitution has been in effect, including their First Amendment, these are some things that have been considered to be un-American, a point to which I'll refer later. Women's right to vote was once considered un-American. Japanese and Chinese immigration, civil rights, unions, gay rights, alcohol, marijuana, different languages spoken by migrants in public, punk rock, socialism, yoga, veganism. These are some things that clearly the First Amendment didn't protect at some point, and a number of Americans, especially their politicians, wanted to see these topics curtailed. So when a US Senate committee sits and tries to lecture the world on free speech, just take some of that into consideration. I'm going to be quite direct because having watched substantial parts of the committee hearing before Farage trudged off to see his friend, the one who won't release the Epstein files despite promising to do so, there were a number of pain points that need to be touched upon. Europe can pass any law it wants, and if US companies don't like them, they can sod off. The US forcing their businesses on sovereign regions is not indicative of a free market, but is capitalist arrogance, aggression, and colonialism. To then use China, as one of these so-called politicians did, as a bogeyman to justify this ridiculous attempt to further influence European lawmaking beyond the impact of corrupt US lobbyists is insulting and extreme overreaching. If the USA is so concerned about China, then it should get its own companies to stop building their products in Chinese factories. If it wants to protect the companies that use the facilities of the nation they're trying to alienate, then they need to get their own house in order. And when they're done, they can send a respectful letter to Europe and the UK and ask them to pretty please let their companies operate in these regions too. It seems having potentially lost access to the market in Africa, US companies are circling their wagons in Europe. I don't normally go in for personal attacks, but Jim Jordan is a hypocrite. The US Constitution doesn't even fit modern-day America. So that dude trying to get Americans to agree to extending their constitution to the rest of the world can say what he wants, but it doesn't mean shit outside of the US, and probably doesn't mean too much more than that in the US either. Bloody hypocrites. They bomb the world, sell arms to aggressive regimes, facilitate genocide, and I repeat again, both parties, and then they think they can lecture the world on freedom of speech. There was one dude from Texas, and I refuse to even look up his name. He asks Nigel Farage a question on Sharia law. Nigel Farage. Did Nigel Farage suddenly become an expert on Sharia law? I'm not going to attempt to answer the question myself, not because I have an opinion on the issue, but because I simply do not know enough about Sharia law to make a statement on it. But in light of what was considered un-American as listed above, how clear-cut is it to even talk about the term Western values? What are they? These people are absurd. And then let's turn to the tough Mr. Farage, Mr. Open, who declares, I take more questions than anyone, even though when he was saying so, he was not even answering the question that had been addressed to him. Nigel Farage was asked directly whether a list of names of people who sexually abused girls and women should be released. Hid behind the answer, that's not what I'm here for. You piece of shit. Earlier, he made out that he was a strong voice in protecting the rights of women and kids against pornography. But when asked whether the Epstein files should be released, he cowered behind a pathetic response. That is the man people think is fit to run a country? Is that what people call British values? He can't stand up for innocent victims of sexual abuse. If he can't stand up for them, how will he be able to stand up for the United Kingdom? If his values do not extend to innocent women and children, who do they extend to? This entire hearing is a charade. It allows actors who play roles as politicians to publicly state how wonderful they are and their beliefs are while they destroy democracy behind the scenes. Just in the last few hours, the US government has announced it will punish NGOs for talking about the genocide being perpetrated by Israel. And they want to tell Europe and the UK that we have a problem with defending free speech. I don't normally swear, but sometimes there is no better form of expression. I sincerely bid all of the senators at that hearing, as well as Mr. Rubio, and you can add Farage to the list too, to very kindly fuck off. The modern world is facing catastrophic events, many of them the result of these kinds of people and the evil that their ilk have done. By continuing to support them and to protect the billionaire donors that feed off the soul and sweat and blood of society, we are committing humanity to a sentence that will only ever precipitate and bring forward our demise. This is Two and a Mic. Rise up and be curious. Two and a Mic.